Support Wrestle Talk!
Give us a subscribe.
We've got a new Knockouts champion. LAX and Lucha Brothers steal the show, and credits be damned, Killer Kross wants to powerbomb Taya Valkyrie off the stage. I am Luke Owen. Leave a comment down below I can reply to, and vote in the poll above my head to let me know what you thought of this show, where you can choose from the best of both worlds, great per view, thumbs in the middle, meh per view, and the worst of both worlds. This is Impact Wrestling's Homecoming 2019. For the first time since the early 2000s, Impact Wrestling returned home to the Asylum in Nashville, Tennessee. It was a really nice moment for the company that's had a lot of ups and downs over the years, from the rise of TNA in 2004, their Spike TV deal and getting primetime TV, going head to head with Monday Night Raw with Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff at the helm, the whole GFW thing changing their name to Impact Wrestling with various folks in charge like Jeff Jarrett, Dixie Carter and Billy Corgan, and moving to various other TV networks like Destination America, Pop TV, and now Pursuit Channel. Stars have come and gone over the years, and the opening video package for the show demonstrated that brilliantly, showing the likes of Roddy Piper, Scott Hall, Dusty Rhodes, CM Punk, and of course AJ Styles. Sadly, there was no footage of one of the best wrestlers in the world, Kazuchika Kurokada's time in TNA, where Vince Russo made him a Kato knockoff because he's an idiot. All joking aside, this really did feel like a homecoming for Impact Wrestling, with a great crowd that were pretty much into everything put in front of them. The setup looked really great too, and it kind of makes you wish that Impact could move back there permanently. And the action kicked off with an Ultimate X match for the vacant X Division Championship between Rich Swann, Trey of the Rascals, Jake Crist of OVE, and All Ego Ethan Page. Back in the day when TNA were gaining momentum in 2004 and 2005, it was almost always worth buying a pay-per-view because you were guaranteed to get a fun X Division opener, and that was mirrored here, with lots of thigh-slapping super kicks aplenty, and Ethan Page slamming Trey to the floor onto Swann and Jake Crist. And because this is an opener to a wrestling show in 2019, Rich Swann got a tombstone piledriver on the floor and was back up and fine 60 seconds later. The finish saw Swann and Trey scale the ropes, but the belt fell off and Swann caught it with his knees, making him the new X Division champion. I'm not sure if that was the planned finish, but the match was 15 minutes of fun spots. One of the more divisive parts of Bound for Glory last year was the skit where Ali went into the Dark Realm to save Kiera Hogan from Su Yung. Since then, Ali has morphed into Dark Ali and aligned herself with Young against former best friend Kiera Hogan, which brings us to this tag bout where, honestly, the story going in was much more interesting than the match itself. Don't get me wrong, everyone played their characters really well. I'm also sure there's a bit of Laurie Blake's face still on Su Young's dress, but the action itself was a bit sloppy in places. Thankfully, the match was saved by the awesomeness of Jordynne Grace, who was on a total other level than the other three women in the ring. She showed off her strength at every possible moment, at one point slamming and powerbombing Ali and Su Yung at the same time. In the end, Ali hit the codebreaker on Kiera Hogan and submitted her with the mandible claw. After the match, Ali and Su Yung wanted to put Kiera Hogan in the coffin, but Rosemary made her return to Impact Wrestling to lay out Young and try and convince Bunny to come back. Ali freaked out and walked away. Again, the story was better than the match itself. We then got a real ECW throwback as Eddie Edwards took on Moose in a Falls Count Anywhere match, which saw Moose powerbomb Eddie into the ring apron twice, Edwards dive off the balcony, and a superplex onto a pile of chairs in the ring. This was easily the best match of the night thus far, and finished with Edwards backdropping Moose over the ropes through a guardrail on the outside, with Alicia Edwards reuniting with her husband to cane Moose in the head for the win. Despite the stipulation, there was only one pinfall attempt outside the ring, which did render it slightly redundant, but this was another decent match. But that Best Match of the Night award didn't last long as Sami Callihan took on Willie Mack in a great match. Despite being announced just a few days before Homecoming, there really felt like a lot of drama going into this match because Sami Callihan and Willie Mack are really good at professional wrestling. Sami was easily among the best parts of Impact Wrestling in 2018, narrowly missing out on our top 10 wrestlers of the entire year, and he showed just how great he is in this match, taking a lower card storyline and making it feel main main event worthy. In fact, it could be argued that this had more heat than the actual main event of the show. It was laid out like a very basic match, with Mac overcoming the constant interference by Dave Crist on the outside, but it was elevated by the performance of Callahan and the crazy athleticism of the Mac. The finish was awesome too, with Mac kicking out at one after both a top rope Death Valley driver and a lariat to tremendous reactions, finally falling to Sammy's pile driver. While it makes sense to build a pay-per-view main event around someone that looks like Johnny Impact and a guy the size of Brian Cage, Sammy was more over with this crowd than both of them put together and really should be the top guy in the company. And by the end of this show, it looks like Killer Kross is going to be the next top heel for Johnny Impact's title. And for my money, that should be Callahan. What was a real shame, however, was the Monsters Ball match between Eli Drake and the Monster Abyss. And really the only reason it didn't deliver is because we saw a better hardcore match just 20 minutes prior between Edwards and Moose. They even did a similar big spot where Abyss backdropped Drake over the top rope to the floor through some tables, which didn't get the same reaction as the guardrail did just one match earlier. They did everything you would expect from an Abyss match: garbage can shots, staple guns, thumbtacks, and even Janice the board covered in nails. The finish was quite the schmoz, with Drake throwing thumbtacks into the ref's eyes, getting chokeslammed into tacks, throwing tacks into Abyss's eyes, and trying to zip tie his hands together, which sadly snapped, making the spot look very goofy, followed by multiple chair shots and a paddleboard to the head for the win. Sadly, the crowd had cooled off after the initial thumbtack spot, so the finish felt quite flat, and certainly wasn't helped by the zip tie snapping. And on the subject of pushing other stars, Eli Drake is probably the best promo in the entire company, and the one he cut before the match was ace. We were then told that members of Survivor Season 37 are in the crowd. Hang on a minute, Season 37?
In a row?
Look, if you've had more seasons of your show than The Simpsons, it's probably time to call it a day. But while the Monsters Ball match between Drake and Abyss was a slight letdown, the tag team title bout between LAX and Lucha Brothers was outstanding. These four men started at 11 and refused to go any lower, busting out dimes, super kicks, and double team moves before the match was even 60 seconds old. Phoenix did an assisted cannonball through the ropes to the outside, Santana did a top rope springboard moonsault, and Penta used an LAX pin as a launching pad to hit a Canadian destroyer. This was effing rad from start to end, easily the best match on the whole show and well worth going out of your way to see. The story of the match going in was that LAX often choke when they don't have Konnan in their corner, which they didn't have here, but they managed to overcome and hit a series of double team moves to get the win and retain their titles. Konnan came out after the match and all five men raised each other's hands. This was so great. What wasn't that great, however, was the Knockouts Championship match between Tessa Blanchard and Taya Valkyrie with Gail Kim as the special guest referee. The whole match was built around the tensions boiling over between Kim and Blanchard, with Tessa accidentally hitting Kim, meaning she missed her visual pin after the buzzsaw DDT, the pair struggling over the belt and accidentally hitting Taya for a near fall, and eventually Kim hitting Tessa with Eat Defeat and Taya pinning her with the Road to Valhalla. There was so much action and friction between Tessa and Kim that you gotta be thinking that Impact want to build towards a match between the two, which would have been more interesting if it was for the title. Taya winning the belt here also doesn't add up with Impact building up Jordynne Grace for what felt like an eventual confrontation with the dominant Blanchard, which again would have been more interesting with the title on the line. Despite the way the match was laid out, Impact seemed to be very high on Taya Valkyrie at the moment, but aside from those dudes in the front row who may have been plants as they were missing during the main event, the crowd didn't really react to her winning the title, even though her sweet looking gear looked like the opening to Saved by the Bell. It was then announced that when Impact moves to Pursuit channel this coming Friday, Impact will also air simultaneously on their Twitch channel. This is a great move by the company, as it's been reported and documented that Pursuit's reach isn't as big as their previous Pop TV deal, but the ability to stream the show worldwide at the same time will help more eyes get on the product. And in the main event, Johnny Impact took on Brian Cage, who came out dressed like the Terminator. I'm not being funny, but that is rubbish. Cage is now the third man I can think of who has come out dressed like the Terminator after Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom 11 and Triple H at WrestleMania 31, and it has never looked cool. He basically looks like WrestleBot 1000 from Crap Gimmick Wrestling. And while we're being honest, this didn't feel like a main event to a pay-per-view. This didn't feel like a match for the top prize in the company. It was actually quite boring. Although Impact diving to the outside and catching Cage with the knee was quite cool, and once again finished with a distracted ref, who was dealing with the Survivor guys at ringside and missed a visual pin by Brian Cage, the third time that has happened on this one show. Not only that, but they did the same 1 count spot that Willie Mack did earlier in the night, and it didn't get as big of a reaction. If you're planning on doing a 1 count spot in the main event to put over the strength of Brian Cage, why do 2 of them in the 4th match on the card? And unfortunately, the finish was a total botch, with both men falling from the top rope, which I think was supposed to be an Impact reversal, and the referee didn't fully count the pin. It was a really damp ending to what was already a pretty tedious affair. Taya Valkyrie came out so that both could pose with their belts to what could be best described as polite applause. Don't get me wrong, both Johnny Impact and Taya Valkyrie are great wrestlers and worthy champions, but neither feel like the most over acts in their respective divisions. But the real story came after the match, as Killer Kross channeled his inner Kevin Owens and Tommaso Ciampa to attack Johnny Impact and Taya Valkyrie on the ramp as the credits came up, with Kross powerbombing Taya into some planted fans at ringside. It was actually a really cool ending to the show, and it made Kross look like a total killer, which I guess makes sense given his name. But there are many other names in the company that should be ahead of him in that position, namely Sami Callihan. Impact Wrestling's Homecoming was a pretty fun show overall. It wasn't as good or as newsworthy as Slammiversary or Bound for Glory last year, but there was a lot to enjoy. Sadly, the last 2 matches let the show down somewhat, and doing 2 hardcore matches that featured similar spots didn't help much. Not to mention that 4 of the 8 matches featured a spot where the referee was distracted, 3 of them had the same visual pin spot to protect the loser, and they did the same 1 count spot in 2 different matches. Still, it's worth getting the replay if you didn't see the show to check out the awesome tag match between Lucha Brothers and LAX, and Willie Mack vs Sami Callihan was a lot of fun, as was Edwards vs Moose. Because the 2 main events weren't as good as they should have been, I have to give Impact Wrestling's Homecoming thumbs in the middle. And if you're curious about Wrestle League, Laurie and I are now joint with 28 points, and Ollie is at the bottom with 27. Still, all to play for as we head towards the Royal Rumble. AEW certainly seems to be catching a lot of people's attention, but who are some of the WWE stars that should leave the company and join the fledgling venture? Check out Laurie Blake's list by clicking the video on screen right now. I've been Luke Owen, and that was Impact Wrestling.